Hey, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're from. Thanks everybody for being here. We really appreciate it. Glenn Setchfield and Eric Warner here at your service today. I'm just going to give you a few moments to gather. Should be a big crowd today, just like last time. We really appreciate the engagement. Engagement was great last time. We had a fun time last time. I know Eric did. He always has fun.
Every time.
Got people still coming in. We got Maureen on deck in the chat. And today, guys, I promise the chat will be working. Q&A or chat. Pick your flavor. All right, I think I'm going to just jump right in, guys. I'm looking forward to getting into it with Eric. So as a reminder, in our first Sandler sales training webinar, we discussed maximizing your engagement with clients and prospective clients, right? Specifically, it was how to effectively set the stage to have a productive discussion and gain mutual agreement on building your relationship. Now, today in session 2, we're going to focus on what motivates people to make changes and how to discover it. And then in our final session, in a couple of weeks from now, we're going to focus on the art and the science of asking good questions. And there is an art and a science to that. I know for a fact, because I've been practicing this on my 12-year-old, right, Eric? It's a very good
It's a really good testing ground.
It is. So just a reminder, though, that if you join all 3 webinars, you'll be able to access Sandler online training programs that are specifically built for financial advisors who want to accelerate their businesses and maintain a healthy growth trajectory. Our facilitator for all 3 sessions is Eric Warner. Eric's the owner of Sandler Training in Boston. And like many of you, he is the owner of his business and is responsible for its success. So he understands your situation. In the past 10 years, he's partnered with the sales team at DMI and worked with thousands of individuals who are consistently focused on their own personal and professional development and want to build strong relationships with their clients, one conversation at a time. So please use the Q&A or chat function today to engage with us. We'll likely save most of the questions for the end of the webinar unless something comes up that's just super relevant to what we're on right at the time. But other than that, I would say I'm just going to hand it off to Eric so we can get cranking. Thanks for being here, Eric. It's a pleasure to have you again.
All right, very good. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate that introduction and getting everybody rolling today. So first of all, thank you for coming. Appreciate all of you being here today. We've got same format as we had last time. We've got about 45 minutes or so to walk through some content with you, and we're going to talk similar to what we did in our first one, but building on that, surrounding some psychology around what causes people to make change, right? And gaining their commitment to want to move forward, right? So the goal here is to share with you some concepts and some things that underlie what blocks people from doing the things that maybe you think they should, or that they frankly think they should, and then talk a little bit about some tactics that you might use to approach those conversations in an effective way. So, as part of this, I do want to try to make this as interactive as I can. So if you joined us last time, you're familiar with this. This is a slide platform we use that allows me to have conversations with you without being able to talk to you, which is the way that this webinar is set up. So there's 2 ways to do this. One is you can scan the QR code, with your phone is one of the easiest ways to do that. And that will get you on the slides. And I see some of you have joined already. The other way is if you've got multiple monitors and you want to have the ability to type things in your desktop, or use your computer, you can click the link that I just put in the chat and you can get on the slides that way. So I see the participant count is rising. Several of you are getting signed on there. And you can, as I'm seeing some of you do, you can give me reactions on here. If there's things that we're talking about that you like, that resonate, you can certainly give me a thumbs up. I tell some poor jokes. If you find them humorous, you can laugh, right? We're going to try to avoid the crying icon here as much as we can today. But this is how I know that, what we're saying is resonating or it might be engaging. And we're also going to do some polls on here. And we are going to do some information gathering that'll help me guide the conversation a little bit so it hits home. So if you guys could take a minute and either scan the QR code with your phone or click the link that I put in chat. And if you missed it in the chat, I can put it in there again. Oh, you know what? It didn't go to everyone. It went to just the hosts and the panelists. So that is user error on my part. I just put it in the chat. So it is there now for everybody. So I see we've got about 60 people on this webinar. Thank you for attending. And we've got about half of you are on the slides. So if you take a second, get in there. So goal here when we're done, for committing the time, is if we can walk out of here with maybe one or two little action items or takeaways that potentially you can put into your day that help the engagements you have with your clients, right? I think about, many of you are, we do a lot of sales training, and none of you can selves consider you to be salespeople. You're advisors, but the reality is, advisors only get to be advisors when they've won a client. And that means we've got to move people in the direction we need them to go to want to do business with us and to continue those conversations. So there's an element of selling that's involved with this. So as we think about that, right, our goal here is to think about what are one or two things we can do to change some of our interactions to perhaps drive a higher level of success. So in our last conversation, we talked a little bit about the number one reason why people change advisors, right? And the number one reason focuses on communication, right? They're either it's a lack of responsiveness or the conversation isn't effective. It's not working. They're not getting their messages across. Concerns aren't being heard. Recommendations might not be being taken, et cetera. So we're going to continue on that theme and thinking a little bit about how do we have really productive conversations. And, in order to help think about the kinds of conversations that we have, I want to get a sense of you all and who I'm talking to here. So there's a variety of stages you go through as advisors, right? So where are you? And this is a pop-up on your phone. So there's a couple ways to look at this. Emerging and building the business. Maybe you're just getting started. Right, you're getting into that. I've got to I got to find my clients. I've got to find my ideal marketplace. I need to think about what am I doing to grow. That develop and growing is, you hit your stride. You've got some clients, and you're continuing to work that, drive some referrals, build some partnerships, grow the business effectively. Rainmaking is you're the producer. It's your job to go out and hunt and find all of those larger deals, get new clients in the door consistently, and that's your key responsibility, right? Or you might be managing and retaining that business. You got a good book of business, you got a large pool of assets under management, and really you're focused on retaining that group and making sure that those clients don't get wooed away by somebody else, or don't stop taking your advice, or maybe you're in that latter stage where you're transitioning this on to somewhere else. So I see the results coming in here. Looks like we've got a pretty good balance. I see there's 38 of you on the slides. And again, reminder there, if you want to get on the slides, scan that QR code on the left, or if you just got here and you want to use your computer, you can join the slides that way. There will be a number of questions that I'll ask you and look to get your input, again, to guide my conversation. So Looks like we got a pretty big balance here of those of you that are very much in the I'm bringing on new clients. I'm looking to get new clients, close more opportunities, bring more clients in the door, or in a few that are in that kind of let's make sure we hold on to what we have and move them forward. So I'm going to speak to both audiences here a little bit when I think about what it takes to have a really productive conversation. So I think about it, think about the conversations we need to have, right? If you think about when you want somebody to make a change, right? And to act on your advice, think about doing something differently. There's a spectrum of activity, right? From, the things that you can help them with, whether it's retirement, education planning, protection, managing taxes, and, leaving a legacy, or simply, having the right level of cash flow for them to be able to do what they need to do now, but also what they may want to do in the future, right? And really balancing that conversations between, well, where do you want to go in the future and where are you today, right? And then sitting in the middle of that is very much risk tolerance and how they think about money, right? So there's a delicate balance there, and knowing that depending on the age demographics, the people you're talking to, their life situations that they're in at the current time, those conversations they're ongoing. And, along the way, if you work with your clients over a lengthy period of time, understanding where they are in the process, knowing what their major concerns are, or frankly, what they should be, depending on the stage of life that they're in, and, being suggestive about the kind of advice that you think that they should be putting to play, right? So we're going to use this as a little bit of a backdrop to drive those conversations. So let me start here for a second, though. When you think about why somebody should invest with you or your firm, what are some of the things that come to mind first, right? And this is a word cloud. So what you can do is you can put 2 or 3 words in there to describe why you think somebody should invest with you or invest with your firm. So this would, okay, experience, good. Oh, there's a question on here. What is rainmaking? Sorry about that. So rainmaking is really, you're the provider of it's your job to go out and grow the business and find the clients and reel them in. All right. So I see some good stuff coming in here, right? Trustworthy, knowledgeable, the approach that you've got, positive brand, trustworthy, knowledgeable, better returns, integrity, personable, okay? Better strategy, caring, belief, listening. Good. All right, got some good stuff in there. I still see a few of them coming in here as well. There's a cool feature on this too. I can group these to get an idea of do they fall into particular buckets as well. So let's let the engine do some thinking on this and see what it comes up with, right? All right, so trustworthy, experience, planning, commitment, okay? Diversity of products, passionate about helping people, top service, safety, okay? So a lot of good stuff here. So here's a question I have for you guys. What the good news or the bad news about this? It's all good stuff. It's all critical for you to succeed in your business, but how much of this, let's pretend you're competing for business. You're competing with somebody to decide, should they do business with you or should they do business with somebody else? Should they use their strategy or your strategy? Should they keep on the course that you've put them on, or should they go another course? The reality, a lot of these things are they're more about you than they are about the person you're talking to, right? You're trustworthy, your experience, you're going to give them, safety and some ways to think about how to control their destiny, right? You're committed to them, right? You're passionate about helping them. You got great products and diversity of products that are available. If you're being honest, is your other advisors that you might be competing against, are they saying anything different? Are they saying something that says, you know what? I'm not that trustworthy. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure this out as I go along. a lot of my clients have second guessed some of the things I have and their experience is not great, but I'm just hoping that you like me enough that you want to give me your business, right? So sometimes we get caught up in this, and this happens across the board. Is a lot of times people get caught up in what we do and what we have and how we provide it, and they lose sight on, well, why would the customer need it, right? Why is it that other people have taken this advice, and how did they glean from it, and talk from that perspective, right? Because the reality is, despite a lot of this stuff here, you sometimes still have people who resist your advice. Is that fair? Right? People don't always take the great advice that you give them, right? So let me ask you this question. Why? Right? This is another word cloud. Why do people resist the good advice that you give them? Why do they do that? So one of my fun things to do, and I realize that you probably think I'm a nerd when I tell you this, but one of my things to do is I'll ask ChatGTP questions. So I asked ChatGTP to act as a psychologist. It's important that ChatGTP knows who they are. And I asked them this question: why do people resist good advice? And they gave me some very good answers about why that happens. And then I reframed it and I said, does that change if it's financial advice? And the interesting thing was, it didn't change it a lot, but it did put some significant caveats on it, right? So I'm seeing your answers come in here: procrastination, they know somebody else, that's old beliefs, they don't really want to change, procrastination, skepticism, fear of change, yeah, uncertainty, they're not educated enough, they don't really know the balance and the difference, right? So there's a lot of dynamics here that go into getting people to change, right? So let me group these up. Let's see how you guys do on the psychologist scale in terms of some of the big categories here. So relationships in the past, right? So trust, fear, old beliefs, skepticism, right? Too many options. They don't know how to separate them. They're busy, and they may not see the value, right? So you guys did pretty well there, right? Because if we ask, psychologists why it is that people don't take advice, it's for a number of things, right? One is, cognitive dissonance, which is a very real thing in decision making, right? They resist advice because it forces them to do things that are uncomfortable and address things that they don't want to address. They like things the way they are, and by thinking about it, it becomes uncomfortable and they don't want to do it, right? They also feel like if they're taking somebody else's advice, they've lost the autonomy and the control over what they're really doing. Change is an emotional thing: anxiety, feelings of inadequacy or shame about stuff that they've made, mistakes they've made in the past, that can lead to taking good advice in the future because they don't want to admit that they've made mistakes in the past, right? Habits and comfort zones. People like routine. They like to do what they've always done. So it's easy to not do anything, right? How often have you given people advice on what they should do and then they end up doing nothing, right? And then ego and pride, right? Money is very much tied to personal identity and status, which means they sometimes need, it's hard for them to admit that they need help. And by taking it, that can be a challenge. Mitigating factors: there's a little bit of mistrust. We talked about this in the first session, right? There's challenges sometimes with legacy of people, either through the way things are portrayed or how they view certain types of folks that work in the industry that you're in, which is hard to overcome at times. Short-term versus long-term. People live in the here and now. A lot of what we're talking about is long-term planning and making sure they're prepared for future events, which they might not be able to wrap their heads around yet. And frankly, they don't necessarily understand what it is that you're talking about. So if we think about some of those things as a backdrop, sometimes it means we very much have to change the tenor of what we're talking about, how we're talking about it, and more importantly, when we find somebody who wants to learn, how do we develop that interest before we start to tell them how we can fix the problem? Fair? So if I think about this, that's really changing the dynamic away from not what you do, but why people work with you, why people come to us. And thinking about how you have that conversation surrounding here are some of the main reasons why people value our guidance. People come to us and make investments with us, right? So a lot of that starts with future state, right? When we meet with people, right, we hope to understand where they see themselves in the future. And most people have issues thinking about. You go back to that timeline, it might be retirement, it might be education planning, it might be taxation, it might be legacy, right? These are the high level areas that people want to have conversations about. In order for us to understand which of those is most important to you, right? We'll get a better understanding of where we are today, right? And where you would like to be in order to get a better understanding of what the current state looks like. And then for many, there's a gap between where they are and where they want to be. And there are certain things we help people understand about their journey from going from where they are to where they want to be, such as, right? And some of those such as's could fall into, investment products that are available, ways to mitigate risk, right? You start to move in investment strategies to think about where they are. If we talk about, the conversation we had last time about the upfront contract, melding this dialogue into the upfront contract a little bit gets you that ability to really discover what's going on with them and figuring out, is there a gap between where they are and where they want to go? Fair enough? So if we've set the stage and we're talking about why, not what you do, but why people come to you, it's a lot easier to do a deeper discovery conversation, right? Because you're focusing on what's important to them, finding out where they're getting permission to understand where they currently are, and then look at those gaps to test and find out, do you have solutions that might fit to help them? And at that stage, you can probably go into a little bit of a deeper discovery conversation, right? Because you have to discover what of those things are most important based on the stage of life that they're in, based on their current situation, based on environments in terms of income or a variety of other things as to where they are, maybe in their career, et cetera. That we've got to discover where they are, where they want to go, and what that gap looks like. Okay, so I want you to think about this for a second. When you are talking to somebody, maybe who's not working with you. So if you're in that growth stage or that rainmaker stage and you're trying to acquire a client, when you go into a first discovery conversation, what do you want to discover? Or if somebody comes to you that's an existing client and says, hey, I'm thinking about X, thinking about saving for my kids eventually to go to college. I'm thinking about leaving a trust to someone, right? And you have a discovery conversation with them. What are you looking to discover? So again, we're back to the word cloud here a little bit. If you think about good discovery to find out if you have advice for them, if you have advice that they should take, before you give it to them, and you're in a discovery meeting, what do you want to discover? How much does the fact that our brains finally from just protect us interfere with a person's willingness to change? Gene, that is an excellent question. Yes, there is definitely that status quo. People kind of get stuck in the I'm safe, I'm comfortable here right now. If I make change, that represents risk. You don't want to take that on. That's a very good point. And that's where a lot of this stuff comes from, right? All right, so what do you want to discover? You want to discover goals. You want to discover needs. You want to discover concerns, levels of pain, okay? Wants, worries. All right, their objections, quantifiable needs, hopes, fears, commitments. Yep. So there's a lot to discover. There's a lot to think about here. And if you think about, we talked a little bit about these are sensitive conversations. You're talking about money, and you want to talk about, people's pains with money. Sensitive topic, right? It's that protectionism. I'm comfortable, right? Needs, importance, hopes, fears, goals, right? All of those things that go into important discovery, right? So this is where how you set the stage for those conversations becomes critically important, right? But look, I'm sure this has happened to maybe more than one of you. You do a good discovery conversation. You understand goals. You understand things that they're interested in. You understand, why it is that they feel like that they need this, right? They see the gaps in their finance. They see that they should be doing something differently, but you give them advice and they don't always act. Is that fair? It happens, right? So typically when that happens is perhaps we found the gaps, we found the goals, right? We found the hopes. Maybe we even got a sense of, well, this is what they want, but we didn't get behind, well, why do they want that? Why is that important to them, right? What is it that achieving that would do for them? And therein lies the difference between getting somebody who's interested and intellectually involved with what you're talking about and committed, which is emotionally involved in what you're talking about. So if we think about good discovery, it generally gets to what in Sandler we refer to as pain, which is the emotional drivers for them to do something different. What is their compelling reason to want to do business with you? What is their compelling reason to want to take your advice? What is their compelling reason to make change? What is their compelling reason to embrace some of those fears they have and potentially do something different? So if we think about that at a high level, when people think about, why they want to invest, or perhaps why they want to buy a certain strategy, it's because they want to have something that they can't currently get. What is that? They want to know something that they don't currently know. Well, why do they want to know that? What's important about knowing that? They want to be able to do something that they can't do today, and they want to be known for something that allows them to be recognized for it, right? So thinking a little bit about the why versus the what, right? What do they want to achieve? Why do they want to achieve that, right? What sits behind that? And many of you, I would imagine, are very good problem solvers. You're very good at figuring out, right? What's the issue, right? What's the high level challenge that they're trying to solve for? And then we present them solutions. And I'll say that being a good problem solver sometimes gets in the way of being an effective advice giver to gain people's commitment to take action, right? Because when we solve problems, we're at an intellectual level and not an emotional level. And the reality is people buy, they decide to change based on emotion, and they use intellect to justify those decisions. So if somebody says, I'm buying an annuity, it's because you got them excited about the outcome and what that will produce for them in the future. And that's allowing them to sleep better at night about their current planning process. It's the emotional attachment to that as to why they made that decision. And when somebody asks them, why did they do it? They're going to justify their decision based on all the intellectual facts. They're going to give you all of the logical and rational reasons about why. But the reality is that decision does not start with logic and reality. It has to start with, why does this matter to you? And then they'll start to embrace the logic and the rational to get to where they are, right? So the human brain, when it comes to taking advice or making changes, is a delicate balance between getting people emotionally involved and giving them enough intellect to be able to justify those actions that their emotions drive them to take. And if we think about really, there's 4 types of emotions that prompt people to buy things, that prompt people to make changes, that prompt people to make investments in new things. It comes down to 4 things. Pain now. Something hurts and it needs to go away. Pain in the future. If I don't fix this now, bad things are going to happen later on, right? Gain in the present, right? There's an immediate return. There's a tangible impact that I'll get today if I do this, or gain in the future, right? I can assure you that no one is taking your advice unless you've consciously or subconsciously got them to connect with one of these things. Sometimes they may take your advice because you've done a really good job of presenting the intellectual side of it, but it's because they have a conscious connection to what this will do for them later on. Doing this intentionally is, let's find out what that is first, find out how committed they are to doing it, and then leveraging that to ensure that they're committed. So here's my question to you. Let's test your psychology knowledge now. What provides the highest level of motivation to change? Is it pain? Is it fear? Is it gain now or in the future? All right, so votes are coming in. Balance is very much on the left side of this slide. Pain in the present, fear, which is pain in the future, and gain now. And I would say that you guys got this pretty much right on. Fear is starting to catch up, but pain in the present is the most compelling reason for people to take action. Something hurts and it hurts now, right? Perhaps a slightly morbid analogy, but if you've got all the indicators of a potential looming heart attack, right? And you go to your doctor and they say, you need to start doing this, this, and this, or this is going to happen in the future. I mean, there's a 50-50 chance that you'll do it. If you go to your doctor and say, I'm having some pains, and the doctor says, well, the pains are coming from this, this, and this, and if we don't take care of some things, those pains will get worse, and eventually you'll have a heart attack. That pain now is going to push that number up to approximately 80% of your willingness to make some of those changes and take that on, because that pain is real. Unfortunately, we don't always get those kind of warning signs with examples like that, but that's generally where you are. So if you have to think about this, and I often like to think a little bit about this as, let's pretend you are more of a doctor than you are someone who's giving out financial advice. Reality is, talking about people's monies, their future, their investments, their risks, sometimes is as much of a sensitive conversation as your own personal health and well-being, right? And really good doctors are really, really good at understanding what it is. If you need to have something done, make a change in your health trajectory, they're really good at helping you understand why that's important, right? I'll give you a personal example of this. My wife just had her ACL repaired. My wife is a 56-year-old woman. 25 years ago, they never would have repaired her ACL. They would have basically said, just leave it. You can operate without your ACL. We brought her to one doctor who was renowned for this. He had done tens of thousands of these operations, and he had an impeccable record, and by all accounts was the best in the business at this. We went in and had a meeting with him, and he said, okay, you want to get your ACL replaced, and simply said, tell me what you're hoping for here. And she said, well, I would like to be able to get back to full regular activity. And he said, okay, let me tell you about the procedure. Let me tell you how it works. Let me tell you how it's going to be done. And he went on for 15 minutes about the intricacies of the knee and everything that needed to be done. And he said to her, "Are you ready to make this commitment and move forward?" And she said, "Yes, I'm ready to do it." He said, "Great, go see the receptionist on the way out, book your time for our surgery, and we'll get it done in a few weeks." We walked out of the waiting room and we walked directly past the scheduling department. I looked at my wife and said, "Where are you going? I thought you said you wanted to get this done." And she said, "There's no way that guy's touching my knee." And I looked at her quizzically and I said, "Why not? Sounds like he's really knows what he's doing. He's got this done." And she said, I don't trust him. He doesn't even understand who I am or why I'm doing this." I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. I said, "So what do you want to do now?" So we went to another doctor who spent 45 minutes with her, and all he focused on with her was what happened, what was going on, what were the conditions that led up to this situation, why is it that you felt like you got injured the first time, and if we're going to try to get this fixed, it's going to be really hard. It's going to take a long time. Why is it that you want to do this? What is it that's driving you to do this? And if you don't do this, what's your potential risk? And they had a lengthy conversation about why it was important for her to get this fixed. The reality is, he moved her past what she was thinking about, wondering, and considering, and got her into being emotionally involved. What happens if she leaves this alone? And by doing that, built the trust to say, I'm willing to take on a 9 to 12 month rehab to go through this incredibly painful procedure to gain something, to ski with my grandkids at some point, that's why I want to do this. And he focused all of his things on, here's the outcome that you're going to get that will keep you away from all of these things, right? So it's critically important to get beyond the what, right? What are they thinking about, right? What are they not sure of? What are they wondering? I'm thinking about, putting in a different life insurance plan. I'm not sure if I have enough coverage. I'm wondering if an annuity strategy would be useful to my future income gains. I'm looking into some options surrounding. I'm considering. We often so quickly go to, that's a great idea. Let me tell you a little bit about what we have to offer, where people use these things and what success looks like. And we go into, frankly, sales mode versus pausing to find out, well, why are you thinking about these things? What prompted that? So what I'm going to talk now is we've talked a little bit around the psychology about why this is important. Let's talk a little bit about the tactical and how do you do this, right? Because these are delicate conversations, right? So part of it is you got to get permission to discover why they're thinking about these things, why they want to explore them further, why they're considering these options, and really get underneath, what are they worried about? What are they concerned with? What are they frustrated by? What are they confused with? Because those are, frankly, buying words, commitment words, whereas thinking, wondering, considering, looking into are intellectual. I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people who are interested in what you do. They've ultimately not done anything. So when somebody says something to you like, well, I'm a little concerned about the amount of money we have in retirement, and I'm looking at options to increase what the fixed amount of money I'll be getting every month in retirement might be. Okay, there's a problem, right? I'm wondering if there's better ways to increase that longer term. We often might go quickly to solution. This is something that we call the pain funnel. And the pain funnel is largely designed to take intellectually based problems and move them into emotionally based problems. And it's effectively not that different than what a doctor or a psychologist would do when they're trying to figure out what's the real issue, right? What's underlying? Because the reality is a lot of the things that people bring to us are surface level. They're not that level below. So by simply asking somebody, well, that's interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about where that's coming from? Maybe give me an example of the kinds of things that you're thinking about. One, proves you've heard them. Two, gets them involved in hearing their perspective. And you may find out that when they start talking about what prompted their interest or what prompted what they're thinking the options might look like, you might find out that that's actually a very different problem that needs to be fixed. So fairly simple, basic questions, right? Oop. Follow that up with, well, is this a recent concern, right? What have you already tried to do to address that concern, right? Get a sense of what research have they done, right? Is this something that just popped up based on something they read, they heard, they saw, right? Where did that come from? And really getting behind the reasons why they're looking, which then helps you dig into a little bit more of that emotional side, right? What do you feel would happen if we don't address this, right? Or how is this affecting you personally in terms of your impact? So it's a short series of questions that really takes somebody who's interested to getting a much deeper understanding of why it's important to them personally. And the reality is, there's your difference between intellectual interest and commitment. Now, this is tested, frankly, came from a psychologist who used to ask David Sandler, founder of the Sandler Selling Methodology, these questions when he was in therapy. So he created it into a sales tool. I know that sounds provincial, but that's the reality of where this came from, right? So getting people to open up. Now, these questions aren't going to fit every situation, and they need to be adapted to you, your style, your situation, and the customers that you're talking to. But the core of what they bring to the table is get them talking about it, get their perspective, understand, kind of where it came from and what it is that's prompting it, which is pain indicators, and then really, digging into, well, all right, well, how important is it for you to fix it? Which allows you to then repeat it back to them, summarize what you heard, validate that you got it right, understand, the reasons why it's important, and then test how committed they might be to solving it, right? So there's differences here, right? We talked about some of the problem statements here, right? We're working on starting a college savings plan from our kids. We're spending more money than we should be. We're wondering if our assets will be adequate for retirement, right? There's more going on there. What does that look like? And if we can work them through this series of questions, we might get them at the end saying something like, well, because I'm in debt and I'm embarrassed and I can't go out with my friends, right? Fixing that for them is going to be getting them much more motivated to take action than simply showing them a plan about, well, how they might be able to pay that debt down faster, right? Or I feel overwhelmed by all the choices that I have and I don't know what to do and I'm immobilized by it. Okay, so if you can provide them a solution that's simplified and makes sense to them, their commitment to do it is much higher, right? We're worried our retirement income won't support our lifestyle, right? Those are not intellectual statements, they're emotional statements. So when we get people to that point, prove that we listened. What I think I'm hearing you say is you're interested in this strategy. You're having these particular challenges. These are the reasons why that's important to you. And these are the things that I've considered and done already. Did I get all of that right? You have to be that doctor that listens, that hears them, that allows them to give their input, their perspective, and their understanding, because otherwise you don't know what they think, why they think it, or even what else they're considering or what their level of understanding is. Got to get it in their words. Even if you've heard somebody say it 100 times, I'm looking at doing some college planning for my kids. Everybody's different. Everybody's situation's different. And frankly, you're talking about asking them to do something materially different. So find out why it matters to them. Prove that you listened. Find out how important it is. Scale of 1 to 10. Love that. Simple question. Everybody understands that. Scale of 1 to 10. How important is this for you to address right now? Right? Are there other priorities that might pop up that would cause this to be pushed to the side, right? Is this something that, right now feels good, but 2 days from now, you might wake up and say, not so much? 1 to 10, where is it? And then test that commitment. I hear that a lot. Sometimes here's what happens instead. Tell them all the reasons why they might walk back what you've recommended that they do. The only way you can fix an objection is to understand the objection, know where it's coming from, and then you can potentially overcome it. So test it. What happens if? What happens if you read further on this, or you see these details, or you get second thoughts, or somebody else whispers in your ear and says this isn't a good idea? How will you deal with that, right? Ask them those open-ended questions so you can discover. Perhaps one of my favorite quotes: if I only had 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes finding the solution. You're problem solvers. You have lots of solutions. Be patient. Before you offer the solution to somebody who says, I'm interested, or I'm concerned about, I'm wondering, I'd like to explore, I've heard I should be looking at things like this, pause and stop and find out with some simple, basic questions. What's their perspective? Why is it concerning to them? And is it something that they're really committed to doing because there's an underlying reason as to why they want it fixed? Or is it just simply that's something that's driving interest? Spend that time, invest that time, and have them know that you're connected to fixing their situation, not just putting a product in front of them or a strategy in front of them that, frankly, has worked for others, but they don't feel like it's theirs. So with that, we're in that 50-minute period, and I know we wanted to leave some time for questions. I'm happy to take questions, but this has been an introduction, a high level of some of the concepts that we work on with our clients here at Sandler Training, helping people understand how to do this on a regular basis in their habit. If it's anything that you want to talk more with me about, you can scan that QR code that has my name under it, and you can talk more with me about it. DMI has been a valued partner of ours for a long time. This is one of the services they like to bring to their clients to help them get the highest level of value from them and what they bring to the market. If you're an existing DMI client, you want to talk more about the partnership I have with Sandler and some of the tools that I can provide DMI clients, reach out to your VP and they can walk you through what some of those look like. If you're a brand new to DMI and you want to talk about the value that DMI can bring, you can scan that QR code and get to Declan. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for your participation via our slides. I hope you pulled one or two things out of this that you can put into action and think about how do you make it your own and how do you incorporate it into your process in engaging with your clients, and that it'll produce some value to you over time. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to stick around or open up. Glenn, I'll turn it back to you and we can go from there.
Thank you so much, Eric. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? And I know you're probably processing a lot. Maureen, if you could let us know too, if you've seen any questions come across. But if you're processing, well, what are my questions? Think about it, but don't be afraid to reach out to Eric. He's happy to help. And you can hear about the options that are available through Sandler. But I've looked at the software myself as well that we're making available to those that attend all 3 webinars, and it's a really great way to think about the questions you might want to ask and the direction you might want to head with Eric, but give him a shout. Happy to help. Or if you'd rather talk to Declan, either way, we'll get you pointed in the right direction. So the one thing I would mention is you don't want to miss the 3rd webinar. So we've got Mastering Discovery on September 25th. So that's where we're going to be talking about leveraging questions to educate and gain commitment. So don't miss out on that.
Yeah,
I
Glenn,
know.
I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of what we'll talk about in that final webinar is how do we create good questions that get people talking, right? A lot of the questions I shared with you today in the pain funnel is, they're high level, they're fairly generic questions. How do we use some art and some skill around making those our own and fitful of the situation, where so people frankly will be comfortable answering them, right? When you ask somebody, how's this affecting you personally? Some people could recoil a little bit. We might have to think a little bit about how do we get artful in asking that question. So that's one of the things that we will do in that final session, is now that we've given you some things to think about in terms of how you set the stage for your meetings, how you develop and discover, how do we be really good at asking questions to take us where we need to go.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to it, Eric. It sounds like everybody else is too. So we're getting some comments in the chat. No questions though today. I didn't expect it. I imagine a lot of people are just processing what was discussed. So again, reach out to Eric. He's very happy to help. And we will see you guys in a couple of weeks on September 25th, as always, at noon Eastern on Wednesday. But you guys have a very nice rest of your Wednesday. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone.